Yo, what is up guys? Welcome to another LeetCODE video. Today we're going to be looking at problem number 5, longest palindromic substring. Okay, so let's look at the problem. It says, given a string S, return the longest palindromic substring in S. And then we're giving two test cases. Example 1 gives us BABAD, and the longest one is going to be BAB or ABA. And the second one, we see CBBD, and the longest palindromic substring is going to be BB. So let's try to understand the problem. Alright, so right off the bat, we can think of two ways of doing this. The first one might be the most intuitive, if you will, and that's going to be simply, if we have the string BABAD, we can think of a way of solving this by checking each character one by one, and then analyzing, okay, so is these first two characters starting off of B, is this a substring? And then checking if this is a substring, and so on and so forth. Since I have to check for the longest palindromic substring, I'm basically going to have to check for each character and then check if each one of these contains the longest palindromic substring. So the time complexity that this would give us would be n for each one of the characters I have to check, and then n squared, as I would have to check each character in each one of the substrings for each one of my characters. So this would give us the big O n cubed. So this is a good solution. Let's try to see if we can come up with a more time-efficient way of doing this. So what if we started by assuming that the middle of for each character, we're going to assume that is the middle of our palindrome. So instead of checking one by one and then checking each of their iterating substrings and each one of their characters, what if we simply assume that each character is the middle of the palindrome, and then we just check each subsequent character next to it. So we would only be checking each character, n, and then checking the following characters next to it, giving us another n. So this would be n squared time complexity. What if our palindromic substring is even numbered? So we can't exactly just assume it's the middle and then check its subsequent characters next to it. We instead have to check both of them at the same time and then check if the palindromic substring is continuous or not. So very simply, all we would have to do is subtract n minus 1 to see if the character next to it is a palindrome or not. So what we're going to do is check for both odd and even palindromes. Let's get into the code so this makes more sense. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, if my palindrome is of length 1 character or less, we basically want to just discard that, because if it's 1 character, it is obviously going to be a palindrome. So we're just going to return that answer. So we're going to do if my string size is less than or equal to 1, then we're simply just going to return S. Now what we want to do is go through each one of the characters from S and basically use 2 while loops to analyze if it's either odd numbered or even numbered palindrome. Okay, so first off, I'm going to start a string where I'm going to store the longest palindrome I can come up with. So for this, we're going to do string, and let's just call this long palindrome. And we're going to set this to empty. And now we're going to open a for loop where we're going to iterate through each character from our S string. For this, we're going to do for int I equals 0. And we're going to do for as long as I is less than s.size and I plus plus. Now inside of this for loop, we're going to declare 2 variables. One's going to be low and one's going to be high. High being the character next to the character we're analyzing, and low being the one to the left of the character we're analyzing. So for this, we're going to do int low equals I, and int high equals I. So inside of this while loop, we're going to have three conditions. One's going to be low has to be greater than 0, high has to be less than the maximum size of our S string, and that the low character from S has to be equal to the high character from S. So we're going to do while low is less than or equal to 0 and high has to be greater than S dot size, and then S at low has to be equal to my S at high. And so if these three conditions are met, we are going to increment the size of high and lower the size of low so that it moves to the next subsequent character. So low minus minus and high plus plus. Okay, so now we're going to make a new string where we're going to store that substring we just got from our lows and highs. See, by the time we've broken out of this while loop, we'll have the new longest palindrome. And so we just have to store it into a substring and then compare it to our current actual longest palindrome and see if it is larger than the previous one. If it is, we just store it in there. Now we're going to make a new string. In this string, we're going to store the substring with the current parameters of low and high. So then we're going to check with an if statement if this palindrome slash string is greater than our current longest palindrome. So we're going to do string, and we'll just call this P for palindrome equals S dot sub str. And we're going to do the low plus 1. The reason why this has to be plus 1 is because by the time these conditions are no longer met on our while loop, our low will have gotten one place too low. And we're going to do the same thing for high, but we also have to subtract high minus low to get the actual length of the substring we want to check. So we're going to do high minus low minus 1. So we are given the exact location of this substring and the length of it. Okay, so now we're just going to make an if statement where we're going to compare both of the palindrome sizes. So we're going to do P dot size, is greater than the current longest palindrome dot size and inside, if this palindrome happens to be longer than the current longest palindrome, then we're just going to set longest palindrome equal to the current palindrome. Okay guys, so basically right now we've checked if it is an odd numbered palindrome, which one would be the longest. But within this for loop, what we can also do is check if it is an even numbered palindrome. To do this, all we have to do is use these same variables up here, but now reset them so that our low is one subsequent character next to the character we're checking. And to do this, all we have to do is I minus 1. So that every time we're checking a character, we're checking the one next to it. So by doing this, we're checking two characters at a time and then checking the ones next to it to see if the palindrome continues or not. So now all we have left to do is, since our lows and highs work just the same and our if statement is also going to have to check if it is currently the longest palindrome, we just have to copy paste those two functions down below and we will have finished our code. Now all we have to do is just return the longest palindrome. Now let's see if it passes the test case. Okay, so apparently I misspelled and it's supposed to be long palindrome, not longest. I'll put the code down below so you guys can work it out for yourselves. Again, I also forgot that this is going to redeclare the string. Again, make sure that when you're copy pasting the if and while loop, you don't redeclare the p string. Okay, so we're just gonna hit submit. And there we go. Again, so for time complexity, it's going to be n squared because we have a for loop checking each one of the characters and then nested while loops checking if it's a palindrome or not. So at the worst case scenario, it's going to be n squared. And as far as space complexity, since we're really only storing 2 variables, it's going to be at worst case a 1. Again, guys, the code's going to be down below. If you guys have any questions, further comments, if you guys could come up with a more efficient way of doing this, please let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.